American Airlines is drastically cutting its flight capacity in October, down 55% from last year. The move comes on the heels of news that the airline will furlough or lay off 19,000 employees when federal aid allotted to the industry expires next month.
American says it expects to have 40,000 fewer employees in October compared to when the pandemic began. And as Congress can't seem to agree on another stimulus package, the Association of Flight Attendants is spreading the hashtag Relief Now to extend payroll support for aviation workers. International President of the Association of Flight Attendants, Sara Nelson, joins us now to talk about all of this. It's so great to see you, Sara.
Good to see you, Sara.
Good to see you, too.
Just bring us up to speed with the state of any potential negotiations and your expectation for upcoming layoffs.
Well, Crystal, it shouldn't be this hard to do the right thing. So we should have seen action from Congress before the August recess. No one should have left town. We've had 57 million people now file for unemployment. And if I'm going to talk about the airline industry alone, we put in place the most effective jobs program in all of coronavirus relief in March. And that is keeping people in their jobs, connected to their health care, continuing to get a paycheck. But that ends on September 30th. And right now what you're seeing is the airlines planning for October 1st without those federal dollars to keep people on the jobs. And what that also does is it does away with the requirement for these airlines to continue to serve all of our communities. So while you gave the example of American Airlines is one that has decided to fly as much as they possibly can. Some of the other airlines' numbers are much, much less. So we're seeing a drastic reduction in capacity, and the airlines carry our mail as well. So our communities are going to suffer along with our jobs.
And Sara, I mean, as I understand it, one of the predicates for accepting a lot of this money was that they weren't allowed to do layoffs. And now that some of this is happening, they seem to immediately going down that path. So, I mean, who is really at fault here? Is it Congress? Is it the companies? And ultimately, what can actually be done to save so many of your members?
I don't know why it's so hard for people to recognize that we are in the middle of a raging pandemic. This is the biggest crisis the airline industry has ever faced. It's certainly the biggest crisis our country has faced in over 100 years, and we're still right in the middle of it. So while some have talked about the airline industry has started to recover, that's not really true. We're talking about 70% drop off from last year, and no business can survive at that rate. So the requirement with the payroll support program that we got in March was to keep everyone on the job, have that funding go through September 30th, and that runs out September 30th. And that is why now you're seeing the realization of layoffs, much like we would have seen in March if we had not had that in place in the first place.
Well, and try to answer that question, because this is what we grapple with every day. For a lot of people here, it seems like they have no awareness that we are in the middle of this massive economic collapse, that there's a need for further stimulus. I mean, they're not here working on it, negotiating. President Trump signed his sort of pathetic executive orders, which really did next to nothing. And then everyone was like, all right, well, I guess that's all we're going to do. Meanwhile, the stock market keeps hitting record highs, and you see these other top line numbers that would seem to be great. You see certain sectors of society, affluent people who are doing just fine. How do you make sense of all that is going on right now?
We are not having the truth coming out of the White House. And so we're having a national narrative set that is not really correct about the crisis that we're facing. 57 million people have filed for unemployment. 1 in 5 Americans is looking for a job where there's only one job there and 5 people looking for it. 1 in 3 Americans is behind in their housing payments. We're going to see massive evictions and foreclosures, and before you know it, that is going to move up the ladder to the banks. And we're going to be talking about bailing out the banks before we talk about bailing out the people. The people are hurting right now, and we are in the middle of this raging pandemic. You know, one of the things that we said in March is that when you are in the middle of a crisis, you try to clear out the easy problems as quickly as possible so that you can get to the hardest ones. And one of the easy things that we put forward was this jobs program where it's a payroll pass-through. The government passes the paychecks directly through to the employees. You use the administrative mechanisms that the airlines already have in place. You keep people connected to that health care and their retirement payments. Everything stays in place, and it's minimal effort on the part of the government and on the part of the business while we try to ride out this crisis. That keeps people strong and able to take care of themselves. You need as many people strong and able to take care of themselves as possible right now so that we can get to the sick and vulnerable, contain this virus, which is the real threat here, and be able to lift our economy again. But that is not the way that we are approaching this. And every day that goes on, it's more lives lost, and the cost of recovery gets higher and higher.
And Sara, just tell us about that in particular, which is that what is the real-time impact upon your members, many other union members, workers, people who others have been affected by this, over a 6-month period now of uncertainty and of perhaps years more in the future? What is the real economic, personal, and impact on people's lives?
Well, Sagar, we have seen this before, and a lot of people ask me, how does this compare to 9/11? And what I would say is that it doesn't compare at all, because we started building back day one after 9/11, and the size of the crisis is nowhere near. But what we do know after that crisis is that the airlines filed for bankruptcies. They filed for bankruptcy. They downsized, they laid off people then, they cut labor costs, they got rid of pensions, people lost their homes, and that is what we are looking at again. And frankly, the American people are going to lose control of this if we don't continue this federal funding, because airlines will have to resort to things like bankruptcies, which led to the whole host of horribles and the consolidation that made the airlines do all the things that people hate. So the members that I have right now are facing losing their homes. They're facing moving in with their families. We have a flight attendant who has been able to stay on her medical insurance, but now she is on the furlough list, and her husband is waiting for a heart transplant. The only reason they're on the list is because they have consistent health insurance. They could lose their place on the list to save his life because of this. This is literally life and death right now. And people are making decisions right now to sell their homes, sell their cars, and consolidate, make really hard decisions. We're talking about service cuts to communities where pilots and flight attendants and other aviation workers commute from, and those communities that people count on that airline service going away, so people won't even be able to get to work, the ones who are still on the job. These are essential workers who have been going to work every single day during this pandemic, risking their own lives to continue this essential service to our country. And we now are telling them, you're going to lose your job. That is what is going on. That is why people are in a state of depression in this country, and that is going through the roof. We're seeing the potential of suicides going up. We've seen in recent studies. This is a real crisis, and Congress needs to act. And as I said before, it shouldn't be this hard to do the right thing. That is their job. That is their job.
Sara, thank you so much. It's so great to have you.
Thank you.
We'll have more Rising for you after this.